Motivation is one of the most misunderstood concepts in modern psychology. Not because the research is unclear. It is actually remarkably consistent, but because the story most people have been told about it is almost entirely wrong. The story goes like this. Motivation is something you either have or you don't. Some people are driven. Some people aren't. The driven ones succeed. The ones who don't need to try harder, want it more, push through. And if you can't seem to get going, the explanation is simple. You don't want it badly enough. This story is not only wrong, it is causing genuine harm. Because the person who cannot get motivated is not, in the vast majority of cases, someone who lacks desire. They are someone whose motivational system is not currently functioning the way the story assumes it should. And treating a system problem as a character problem ensures the problem never gets addressed at the level where it actually lives. Here is what neuroscience actually says. Motivation is not a feeling that precedes action. It is a neurochemical process. Specifically, it is organized around dopamine, the neurotransmitter most associated with anticipation, reward, and the drive to pursue. What dopamine does is not produce pleasure exactly. It produces the expectation of pleasure, the felt sense that doing the thing will be worth the effort of doing it. And it is this anticipatory signal, not the reward itself, that generates what we experience as motivation. This means that when the dopamine system is functioning well, the path from intention to action feels relatively accessible. You think about the goal, the system generates a forward-leaning pull, and movement becomes possible. But when the dopamine system is compromised by depression, by chronic stress, by sleep deprivation, by sustained emotional overload, what gets lost is not the desire for the goal. What gets lost is the signal that tells the brain the goal is worth pursuing. The person still wants the outcome. They simply cannot feel the pull toward it. And from the inside, that experience is indistinguishable from not caring, which is precisely why it gets labeled, by themselves and by others, as laziness. This is not a minor distinction. It changes the entire diagnosis and the entire response. If this is landing somewhere real in you, take a moment to like the video. It helps more people find conversations like this one. And if understanding the actual science behind motivation, rather than the cultural mythology around it, is something you want more of, subscribing makes that possible. Because there is a second critical piece of the motivation picture that almost no one explains correctly, and it has to do with sequencing. The dominant cultural belief about motivation runs in this order. You feel motivated, therefore you begin, therefore you make progress. Motivation comes first. Action follows. And if you don't feel motivated, you wait until you do. This sequencing is backward, and following it virtually guarantees the problem will persist. What behavioral activation research developed originally in the context of treating depression, and subsequently validated across a wide range of populations, demonstrates is that the sequence runs in reverse. Action comes first. Progress generates reward. Reward generates dopamine. And dopamine produces the motivational pull that makes the next action possible. Motivation does not precede action. It emerges from it. And the person waiting to feel motivated before they begin is waiting for something that can only arrive after they start. This creates a practical reality that is both more demanding and more hopeful than the cultural story suggests. More demanding, because it means you sometimes have to begin in the complete absence of any felt motivation before the pull exists, using nothing but structure and the smallest possible action. More hopeful, because it means the absence of motivation is not a verdict. It is a starting point, and starting points can be worked from, however uncomfortable the initial movement feels. The third piece, and this one, is where the real specificity lives, is understanding that different conditions produce different motivation failures, and confusing them produces completely wrong responses. Depression does not produce laziness. It produces anhedonia, the specific neurological impairment of the reward anticipation system that makes all future states feel equally flat. The depressed person cannot feel the pull toward anything, not because nothing matters, but because the mechanism that generates pull is operating under a chemical suppression that willpower cannot override. Telling someone in this state to try harder is the equivalent of telling a person with a broken leg to walk it off. The mechanism is compromised. What is needed is not more effort directed at the symptom, but attention directed at the cause. Chronic stress produces something different. A state of neural fatigue in which the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for planning, sustained attention, and goal-directed behavior progressively loses capacity under sustained cortisol load. The person in this state is not unmotivated in the abstract. They are operating an executive function system that has been running at capacity for too long and has begun to fail at the margins. The response to this is not discipline. It is recovery, the kind of genuine, full recovery that most high-functioning people refuse to allow themselves until the system collapses entirely. Anxiety produces its own distinct failure mode, the narrowing of attentional resources toward perceived threat, which reduces the cognitive bandwidth available for goal-directed behavior. The anxious person is not avoiding their goals because they don't want them. They are managing an internal emergency that is consuming the processing capacity that goal pursuit requires. The task feels impossible, not because it is impossible, but because the system is occupied elsewhere. And then, there is the motivational failure that has nothing to do with neurology or emotional state. The failure of meaning. The person who cannot get motivated toward a goal they have set, a career they have chosen, a life they are technically building because somewhere beneath the surface, something in them knows that this is not actually what they want. And motivation, which evolved to move organisms toward genuine reward, reliably withholds itself from things that, at a deep and honest level, are not actually rewarding to the person pursuing them. Here is the paradox that makes motivation one of the most psychologically complex topics in human behavior. The people who most desperately want to be motivated, who feel most ashamed of their inability to generate it, are almost never people who are genuinely without purpose or desire. They are people whose motivational systems are carrying conditions that have not been addressed, pursuing goals that have not been fully examined, or starting from a position of such depletion that the sequence of motivation cannot even begin. The problem is not insufficient desire. It is a set of conditions that prevent desire from translating into action, conditions that deserve to be named and addressed, not suppressed by force of will. What changes things is not finding the right motivational speech, or the right playlist, or the right morning routine. What changes things is getting honest about which specific condition is actually present, and then responding to that condition with what it actually needs, rather than with what the culture insists everyone needs, regardless of what is happening inside them. The person who is depressed needs the depression addressed. The person in chronic stress needs genuine recovery. The person managing anxiety needs the anxiety treated, not the productivity optimized. And the person who cannot find motivation for the life they have built needs the courage to ask whether that life is actually the one they would choose, if they were choosing from truth rather than from expectation. Motivation is not a character trait. It is a signal, and the most important thing you can do with it is learn to read what it is actually telling you, rather than judge yourself for not having enough of it. What is the thing you have been trying to force yourself to want, and have you ever honestly asked yourself whether you actually want it at all? Hit the like and subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.